Hey, look everyone, it's Missile Command Recharged for Atari Box. Yeah, for real this time. We already sampled this on Switch 6 years ago when it first came out, and I made a little crack, if you will.
Hey, look everyone, it's Missile Command Recharged for Atari Box. One of the hit exclusive games for the Atari Box that's due to hit this... Wait, what's that? This is not Atari Box? Oh, this is Nintendo Switch. And the game was already available on mobile devices? And it's also on Steam? So why would I want to play Atari Box today? Is it on that Amico thing? Does anybody know? Who cares? I digress.
Anyway, the Atari Box version is much like the PC version, lets you play with a mouse, which is the ideal control method if a trackball isn't available. But then 2 years later, Atari released another version of Missile Command Recharge that's also called Missile Command Recharge. It's more like a different game altogether. And this older version is, to my knowledge, only available on Atari Box, which I think is for free. Last I checked, at least I got it for free. As it's been replaced with the newer version, which I also bought on Nintendo Switch because, hey, touchscreen, third best control method. Maybe. Let's check this out. Released in 2022 and essentially an updated version of the original Missile Command Recharged game that we sampled years ago, Missile Command Recharged, same name, different year, is a remake of the 1980 arcade classic Missile Command, where you take control of 3 missile launchers and have to defend your 6 cities from constant aerial bombardment. This is done by moving the cursor around with your stick or whatever, pressing a button to launch a missile and hope the blast takes out as many inbound warheads as it can reach. When an enemy projectile hits one of your structures, said structure is destroyed, and if all 6 cities are destroyed, it's game over. Recharge doesn't have waves of inbound missiles. It's a continuous barrage of fire that gradually increases in intensity the longer you play. So the main goal is to last as long as possible to attain a high score. Your 3 missile launchers have unlimited ammo, but do require some time to reload before they could launch another missile. And if a launcher is destroyed, it's not out of the game completely. Give it a bit of time and the launcher is back in the game, so long as your cities are still standing, of course. Every so often, power-ups will fly by and when blasted will give you temporary boosts such as defensive shields, homing shots, bombs, and other fun stuff to play with. Also, after each game, you're given your final score and you can spend the points you've earned on upgrades to your launchers, improving the speed of your shots, reload time, rebuild time, and also the hurting power of your blasts. Naturally, with each upgrade, you stand a better chance of survival, but all that means is that you last long enough for 1 billion bombs to be dropped your way. Now, Recharge 2020 was a bit bare bones in its offerings, main mode, upgrades, bits and bobs, fun for a little while, but not much longer. Recharged 2022 is more or less the same thing, but has a little more going for it. The main mode, arcade mode, has a couple modifiers you can enable to make things easier or harder. No rebuild brings in a bit of that old school vibe in that you lose a launcher, it's gone for good. And then you have hyper and casual modes, which toggles the speed of the bombs, the former faster, the latter slower. For what it's worth, enable hyper and no rebuild modifiers because that's where the game gets to be a real fun challenge, and you even get a minor score boost for doing so, which helps in upgrading those skills much quicker. There's also mission mode, in which you play short rounds of Missile Command under certain conditions, mostly involving defending against a barrage for a short while with a finite amount of ammunition. You know, like the battle days. There's also achievements for those who care for such things, as well as options to customize the game experience, sound volume, graphics, colors, even analog sensitivity for your cursor control, which is very much welcome. When it comes to the core gameplay, Missile Command Recharge 2022 isn't all that different from its 2020 original. The general idea of missile defense, temporary power-ups, skill upgrades, and attaining the high score is still there, but now there's a little more meat to the package where there wasn't before. Little modifiers to alter the challenge in arcade, mission mode that's closer to the vintage Missile Command experience, and of course there's a multiplayer aspect. You still have only one fire button for all 3 towers, which isn't much of a big deal here because you have unlimited ammo anyways, but old school controls, 1 button per launcher, would have been nice to have, especially for the mission mode. And I still find analog control a bit slippery at times, but at least now you could toggle the sensitivity to your liking. It's not perfect, and if that doesn't work for you, brother, well, you're pretty much SOL because there's no touch control in this version. The one nice thing about the last version, and honestly the one thing that made the whole game more playable in my eyes, and you took it out. Well, that sucks. Good job, Atari. Take out the one thing that didn't need fixing. Heartbroken. Ugh. Ugh. I really don't care. So it's 2026, times are still kinda shit. That bombardment from the sky to end all of our misery can't come soon enough. A bit of a grim thought, yes, but it's Missile Command where all your battles are destined to end in complete and utter failure anyway, so it kinda fits. Anyway, Missile Command Recharge recreates the vector graphics of the arcade original and enhances it with lots of flashing lights and strobing and stuff. Doesn't have the bloom of the 2020 version, but still it's not a bad looking game in that regard, as it's basically a souped up visual presentation of a vector based arcade game, and anyone expecting more than that is probably going to be left wanting. I do miss the explosive game over of the previous version, the whole sinking under the earth thing after your last city goes down. It doesn't quite have the same impact, if you will. 2022 replaces the generic retro techno chiptune thing that was pretty much the only song playing in that version, with a more colorful collection of tracks that are also kind of techno-ish and sort of blend together, but there's more than one track at least. I think they have like one person doing all the tracks for all their Recharge games, so it's nice sounding stuff for whatever that's worth, and there's slightly more tracks playing in this one game than in the previous version, which only had one song and a loop. And they ditched the old arcadey sound effects of the previous version with more quote-unquote realistic fireworks, explosions, and other such things, which sound okay but loses the charm of the older effects. And I've said this years before with the earlier version, and I'll say it again for this one because it still applies. Missile Command Recharge is a nice little time sink for dirt cheap, and as a modern remake of an arcade classic, fairly competently executed with some little bits and bobs to keep you engaged for the short term. For those who just want a quick arcade fix in a challenging game of endurance, Missile Command Recharge does the job nicely enough for a low enough price point, and for those who only played the initial 2020 release, the 2022 version has enough going for it that it's worth the upgrade. So long as you could get it during a sale, because having to double dip full price for this thing is kind of bullshit. Yeah, it's a nice upgrade, but not enough to go full price over again. But whatever, that's kind of a moot point at this point. Anyways.